Hey everyone, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? I'm surviving. Really rough right now, emotionally. I'm going to try to persevere. I need a lot of help and I don't know where to get it. I need a job. I need financial abundance ASAP, putting it out into the universe. But I'm going to continue the key to the universe. We're going to start with chapter 10, number 2, and its letter. Before I go into that, make sure you hit that like button. It's free. Helps me. Sharing is caring. So share away, spread it far and wide, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so you know when I do my next reading, which I do a lot of them, because I don't think I'm going to have any internet next month. So I am going to pump out as many readings as I possibly can, because this is for humanity. Yep, I'm doing this for everybody, because we need to open up our boxes and paradigms. Chapter 10, the second letter, Beth. Quote, he produced Beth and referred it to wisdom. He crowned it, combined and formed with it the moon in the universe, the first day of the week and the right eye of man. End quote. Seraph Yitzhak Israel, I would assume. The second Hebrew letter is Beth, one of the 7 double letters corresponding to our letter B. Hieroglyphically, it stands for the mouth of man and is referred to wisdom. But since out of the mouth of man proceedeth both wisdom and folly, this letter is called double. Its radical meaning is a house or birthplace, and it's used with the meaning throughout the Bible. For instance, Bethel is the house of God. Elizabeth, the house of Eliza. Bethlehem, the house of bread. Baalbeth, the house or temple of the sun. And symbolic meaning derived from the house as a birthplace is both the womb of nature and of women, from which all comes forth. From this meaning, we deduce the idea of sanctuary or inner shrine, or that secret place where we can retire without fear or disturbance. The closet into which we can go and have shut the door, pray to our Father in secret. Out of the sanctuary come forth the true nature and characteristics which make us what we are. Also, from it issues the inspiration and instruction given us from the divine in the silence. Hence, Beth expresses everything that emanates from the mysterious retreat. My co-host doesn't care that I'm reading off the screen, FYI. She doesn't. As she purrs away. B, called Be It. Pictures and names the be or by, and means being, existence, names, life, bios. The colonial priests of a remote time sent a present from the Delphi to England, being a miniature temple in the form of a hive carved out of beeswax. This was a primal picture, which in the double meaning and for the wonderment of the ignorant was always the house of the god. Be and making the Hebrew word for the original house of God as Beth, which says BDT, and is also their alphabetic name of their letter B, showing that our B is named in the Beth, showing that our B is named in this Beth, sorry. The universal picture language, bow or bow, which Egyptian deities carry to identify themselves, is making as elongated B and names the B priesthood, that the shooter of the A light of or arrow, the Celtic CS. Just as man as the active father principle is represented by Elf, so in Beth, we find the inner passive or feminine principle, the mother force, through which his characteristics are brought forth. While both men and women express both Elf and Beth, man is more Elf than Beth, and women is more Beth than Elf. The three primordial meetings of Beth, the house, the mouth, and the womb, are therefore but different expressions of the idea of bringing forth through the mother principle, for out of the house or inner sanctuary of the heart is brought forth man's spiritual nature. Out of the womb is brought forth man's physical body, and out of the mouth, man himself brings forth his ideas or thought creations. For of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaketh. The Beth represents hierographically the heaven and the earth. It also represents unity made manifest in space and stability, and life made manifest by movement. It represents the spirit of God born upon the waters and the fecundation of matter by spirit. The second commandment, quote, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. Exodus. Since number 2 is the symbol of duality and marks the first step in the differentiation of the first, or one, nothing can manifest objectively upon the mundane plane without duality. That which appears upon the lower planes is but the shadow of the unseen reality. Hence, the second commandment deals with the ever-present danger into which unenlightened man is only too apt to fall, namely, mistaking the shadow for the reality. Therefore, the commandments begin with a warning against mistaking the reflection from the substance, against making an idol out of material things and worshiping it. Note the text says, quote, thou shalt not make unto thee, end quote. Others may carve statues or images for us, but no one but ourselves can make us create an idol out of the shadow. The commandment is not to be taken in the literal sense that we should never carve an image or symbol of any holy idol, principle, or thing, a custom common in Christian churches today. For when we properly use such images or symbols, serve to recall and impress more vividly upon the mind the unseen reality for which they stand. They also have mystical power in themselves. The commandment means far more. It deals with all that number 2 expresses. The overshadowing God consciousness, fully comprehending the law of the descent of the light into chaos, in realizing all the pitfalls and mistakes into which man has likely to fall during his long pilgrimage, gave him at the onset a solemn warning against building up, through the creative power of his newly acquired self-conscious thought, earthly images of the divine, and through the ignorance and darkness of the land in which he toiled, falling down to worship them. Even today, many savage tribes have created thought form elementals, which have become tribal gods, many of which must be appropriated by offerings of blood. Such worship of the false would lead man age after age farther and farther from the worship of the spiritual light, which was to lead him out of the darkness of Egypt, if he would be worshipped, the true instead of an image of his own creation. The duality of shadow and substance is but a passing manifestation belonging to this day's period, and will cease to exist when the shadow has been indrawn into the reality. Since all God's creation in heaven above, in the earth beneath, and in the waters under the earth are images of divine and immutable realities, if we hold fast to this thought and through the image seek to come into harmony with its reality, we will find our path of attainment, a joyous and fascinating journey through a wonderful country full of objects, each of which represents a marvelous God mystery, instead of wearisome climb up a rocky pathway through chilling darkness, dull misery, suffering, and despair. The words, quote, "the waters under the earth," end quote, give the key to the understanding of the commandment. Waters tossed by every wind and blows symbolizes the changing and unstable conditions of earthly manifestation. They are the unstable and varying conditions which, in the sense of back of or underneath every earth condition. Quote, "I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the inequity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and shewing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments." Exodus. The Lord thy God is a jealous God in the sense that nothing can stand between him and man's love for the divine. Anything which diverts man's allegiance from him or is placed before him must be swallowed up in the circle knot. The later part of this commandment may sound like a threat. In reality, it is but a setting forth of the law in its respect as karma. First, it is plainly stated that we are not to make images, mistake them for realities, and worship them. Then the inevitable result of so doing is set forth. It is not the world today suffering from the inequities of the fathers or the disobedience to the second commandment. This first and primal rule of the plane of differentiation or duality. Have not our fathers mistaken the shadow for the substance and fallen down and worshiped the golden calf? Have they not graven images of that which the light revealed to them instead of the light? Do we not today worship various man-made images of God? Do we not worship tradition, a graven image of the revelation of the light, instead of turning our eyes to the light ourselves and knowing that it will lead us out of bondage of our fathers, false images, and conceptions of life? It needs and requirements into a realization of our spiritual heritage. Esoterically, this means that by his misuse of his creative powers, man has impregnated the aura of the world upon the three planes with his mistakes, and thus must finally manifest upon the fourth or physical plane. Hence, the children of man will suffer until his false image have had their day upon earth, have manifested their human origin, have proved their fallibility, and have been replaced by the true worship of the one reality, the divine light. Those who hate the Lord, or those who reserve divine love, or who refuse to work in harmony with the law, they suffer unto the third and fourth generation, not in the sense of a punishment or for something their fathers did, but because they continue to worship the graven images handed down by their fathers. They give their lives and mighty power of their thought to preserve the images which are literally graven upon the Akashic records by their fathers' misconceptions of the one God. Variation and progression are the basic principles of all evolution, an ever-changing manifestation and ever-widening comprehension of unity in the manifold expressions of the first God, the one God. The same divine and inexactable law must show mercy to thousands, an indefinite term expressing a vast number of those who love the reality, who seek the light, who endeavor to keep the commandments and live in harmony with the law as it is revealed to them, instead of worshiping the graven images of tradition. Mercy is shown us, even when we falter and fail, so long as we give our love and allegiance to the one God and earnestly strive to follow the light, which has brought us out of Egypt and out of the house of bondage, the senses. Chapter 11, the second tarot card, the High Priestess. So we had the Magician as one. Here's the High Priestess, the modern day one. This card beautifully expresses the mother idea contained in number 2. In the first card, we see man standing in the midst of nature, surrounded by all the attributes of power or the ability to rule outwardly. In the second card, we find women veiled and enthroned between the two columns of the temple in the portico or entrance to the inner shrine. She is invested with the insignia of spiritual authority, the robe of purity, the triple crown showing that she must rule over the three planes through her divine motherhood. In her right hand, she holds the partially open book of the law, which, however, is partially hidden from the profane within the folds of her mantle. In her left hand, she holds the symbol of her authority as interpreter of the law, possessing its positive, negative keys. The tiara upon her head is surmounted by the lunar crescent symbol of her feminine functions and her power as the bringer forth of the race. She rules not by might nor by force, but by the mysterious power of the mother love, which under the influence of the invisible and periodic forces of the moon enables her to bring forth, as it also does the earth. By the unenlightened moon is supposed to be but a satellite of the earth, although in reality it is the mother of the earth, the giver of its life, terrestrial. In a similar manner, throughout many ages, among the spiritually unenlightened woman has been looked upon as a mere chattel, or satellite of man, yet from whom he has ever received his inspiration as well as his physical body, and to whose mystic power he instinctively bows. Even though ignored, degraded, and denied a soul, she has nevertheless swayed nations and kingdoms and been a powerful factor in the world through the influence proceeding from the sacred inner shrine of motherhood. Women's true place is as the high priestess of mankind, and she would fill the same position in each home. As we have said elsewhere, quote, true women is positive upon the spiritual plane, where man is negative, and negative upon the physical plane, where man is positive. To her belongs the control of all those questions which deal with the higher life. She must use her intuition in the directing of all activities pertaining to the altruistic side of life, just as man uses his reason in worldly affairs. She should be man's moral and spiritual monitor and his source of inspiration and spiritual help, end quote. She it is, as the tarot card shows, who can open for him the book of the law and inspire him with its truths, for he can read and grasp its real meaning only as he seeks within the sheltering porch of the temple of Isis for true revelation of the mysteries of the mother. The two columns express from this inner or feminine aspect the same meaning as the two arms of the jugular in the first card expressed outwardly, positive and negative, or Jachin and Boaz, justice and mercy. In much of the Moorish architecture, especially their temples, we find at the entrance two columns united by an arch with an interlacing of lattice work just underneath it. The symbology of this characteristic form of entrance, either to the home or to the temple, is the same as we find in this tarot card, namely the two columns, justice and mercy. Man and woman, intellect and heart, must be united in the higher aspects of all their forces, and must each send out and interlace their forces over the portal which humanity must enter, the temple of the higher life. On her breast, the priest bears the solar cross, the symbol that must ever express the crucifixion, the effort of spirit to penetrate matter, the light to illuminate darkness, and that which is inner and sacred to express outwardly in the life. Hence, this symbol upon the breast over the heart expresses women, who ever bears the cross in her heart, while man bears it before the world and fights its battles in the arena of life. The veil represents the sacred mystery of motherhood, not to be rudely lifted by the profane and desecrated by the impious, whether this be the motherhood that gives birth to the physical body, or the far more sacred and veiled birth of the Christ child within the heart. Isis is represented as having 7 veils, which shroud the mystery of birth. Hence, birth is the most profound and sacred of all mysteries, and it has correspondence on the 7 planes of consciousness. The first 2 letters of the Hebrew alphabet with their corresponding numbers 1 and 2, as well as the first and second cards of the symbolic tarot, reveal the true relationship of man and woman. God is represented as taking Eve out of Adam's side during a deep sleep because it was not good for man to be alone. In other words, number 1 pierced the darkness or deep sleep of matter, and when by its brightness it was able to produce the shadow, number 2 came into manifestation. Hence, man is the positive and outer expression of the microcosm, and it is man who must fight the outer conditions and make a place for himself, while woman is the inner soul or inspirer or shadow of God to man. This is since number 1 produced 2 as a shadow or impression in matter. Number 2 must have been an inner aspect or the real soul of the manifesting one. For one stands alone out of its side or heart or inner self. It can express the reality of light upon the darkness. If we think of number 2 as radiance instead of a shadow, we will get a better conception of its meaning. For number 2 is a radiance produced by the light of the one piercing the darkness of chaos. Indeed, this is the true mission of a woman, to be radiance and light of mankind, giving birth to the ideals of the race. Hence, the position held by women in any country has always indicated its degree of true civilization and progress. Women should always be the high priestess, reading from the book of the divine law of love in the shelter of the temple or home, that man, in his struggle without a conditions, may catch the radiance of love, truth, and wisdom reflected on his path of attainment. This, however, in no way implies that women should confine herself to the duties of the household and become a household drudge and mere bearer of the race. For the home or temple is a sacred shrine of inspiration to be found in every walk of life. It should be the duty of every true woman not only to sit within the portal of this shrine, be she engaged in whatever duty it in whatever capacity, but she should also be the inspirer or radiant light, leading and guiding man toward ever higher ideals and the greater efforts towards reaching the goal of his highest attainment. Even though she be walking side by side with him, yet in a mystical sense, she should ever be the light set in the window of the home to guide him safely through the storms and darkness of outer conditions. It is also women's place to cover with her mantle of love and healing the scars and wounds received by man in the battles of life, which he fights for her and the home. For within those magic folds, the great law shall bring understanding out of confusion, wisdom out of experience, and strength out of failure. In the hands of the mother of the race rests its salvation, no matter if they be mothers of physical children or mothers of ideals and reforms. Like all things intended for the highest good, the perversion of women's forces have done more to push man deeper into the mirror of selfishness, sensuality, and despair than all other things combined. But the lords of karma, whoever hold a just balance, hold out to women the opportunity for an advanced step because of the lesson learned through suffering and degradation. Because the cross has rested heavily upon her heart, the Christ in her has been crucified and must be lifted up that he may draw all men upon him. Woe then to the woman who lives in frivolity and idleness as the plaything of humanity. Woe to the mothers who bring not forth children of light, but perverted temples of iniquity full of pride, lust, and all manner of unworthiness. Woe to the women who, because of her pride, vanity, and lust, seek not to inspire man, but to entice, seduce, and enslave him. Women today stands in the portal of the temple of the new humanity, and only she can throw wide the door. The day is coming when the eyes of all must be opened, and both men and women behold the living Christ, whom they have crucified. In that day, there can be no recriminations, I saying to the other, quote, thou art to blame, or thou didst tempt me and I did eat, end quote. For men and women are one in the sight of God. A perfect humanity must express absolute equity, but not uniformity. The shell of the nut represents the nut to the outer world and protects the kernel. But if the kernel is bad, the nut is worthless. Oh boy. So here again is the card that they were talking about. just so you see it. Chapter 12, the number 3. Quote, the deity is one because it is infinite. It is triple because it is ever manifesting. End quote. The Kabbalah. Quote, the King of Ages, the merciful and gracious God, the exalted one, the dweller in eternity, most high and holy engraved, his name but a 3 seraphim, numbers, letters, and sounds. Sefer Yetzirah, chapter I. Since one is unity and hence no number 3 is called the first odd number. 3 is a number of the Trinity, hence divine. In number 1, the divine came down into manifestation. In 2, it was met by the inertia of matter. But in 3, it penetrated into matter and manifested the only begotten Son. This process is illustrated by the equilateral triangle, in which the positive and negative forces from the dot above bring forth a stable manifestation on the physical plane, the baseline. The triangle is the first geometrical figure. For the number 2 is like 2 straight lines, which can never enclose a space, and therefore it is powerless until 3 forms a triangle. Again, the triangle may be considered a spirit and matter united by mind. Number 3 is sacred and divine because it symbolizes the threefold deity, the Trinity, the Father, the Mother, and the Son, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost of the Christians, the Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu of the Hindus, the Osiris, Isis, and Horus of the Egyptians. In other aspects, 3 is the number of the 3 manifestations of deity, the Logi. The first logos is unity, the undifferentiated. The second logos is a trinity of the first life, spirit, matter, and cosmic consciousness. The third logos is Mahat, cosmic ideation or universal mind. 3 is the number of the mystery of life. Stinson Jarvis, in his article on the Druids, states that the Druids describe deity as being 1 and 2 and 3. And by itself, our T means 3, and our word TRI, meaning 3, named this number from the Isthmus of Darien to the remote Pacific Islands, showing that there was one Druid word making, for the entire world and one priesthood to carry our words into every country. Father Smitty says 3 was the Druid mystical number. With them, nearly all things resolved themselves into a trine. This was the doctrine or trine teaching preached in America for ages. And Trinity says 3 heaven island God. 3 is a number of the trilogies. Sorry about that, guys. 3 is a number of the trilogies used to measure the manifestations of all things to the human consciousness, such as the substance, life, intelligence, matter, force, consciousness, heat, light, electricity, length, breadth, thickness, creation, preservation, dissolution, thinker, thought, thing thought of, etc. By some, 3 is loosely spoken of as a number of man because of his division into body, soul, and spirit. But as this is only superficial and exotic division, 3 is not properly man's symbol. As 3 includes past, present, and future, it is sometimes called the number of time. It is also the middle of, or the analogy, because all comparisons are expressed in three terms: good, bad, and indifferent. The Egyptian trinity is composed of Osiris, water, especially their sacred river Nile; Isis, earth, especially the land of Egypt over which she reigned; and Horus, air, especially the moist, warm air after the overflow of the Nile in spring. Thus, the Nile represented the Egyptians the great fertilizing power of the Father, and at its annual overflow there was great rejoicing, and many religious rites were celebrated because Osiris was vindicating the Queen Mother, Isis. After the river receded, the entire valley, which before the overflow was dry and brown, was covered with the tender green of the spring crops. The moist, balmy air which pervades the valley at the time was considered the child of Isis and Osiris Horus. If the rains in the interior were late and the raising of the Nile were delayed, processions were formed and prayers offered, entreating Osiris to look forward and upon his spouse with favor. In astronomy, recent discoveries have revealed a trinity in the motions of the stars, each having three distinct motions: rotary, orbital, linear. Each rotates its axis, gyrates around the central sun of its system, and also drifts toward a point outside of its zodiac. Just so does each soul have its inner point about which it rotates, its spiritual sun, about which it gyrates, and which determines the orbit of its evolution, and also its destiny or place in the grand plan of the universe toward which it is steadily being swept by the great law, which involving the qualities necessary to enable it to fulfill its destiny. In addition to the two great star streams, well known to astronomers, a third but much smaller stream has recently been discovered, which is independent of the other two. Such is the mysterious law called gravitation, that the heavenly bodies are not only bound together by mutual attraction, but also held at relatively fixed distances apart, as though gravitation brought them only so near to each other, and some counter-repellent force kept them from approaching near. In reality, that which limits their nearer approach is the limits of their auras. Of these three star systems, one is going outward into manifestation, a cycle requiring some aeons of ages, and one stream is going inward to rest or paralia, which the third and smaller stream is composed of those stars and systems which have attained mastery and become independent of the other two streams. In other words, have become immortal, for the cycle of the Mahavatra, or great world period. Just so are there three streams of humanity, one going out into manifestation, incarnation, one going inward to rest between incarnations, and third, very small stream of those who have obtained mastery and immortality for the Mahavatra, or world period. Science has recently discovered that the entire visible universe is a huge spiral made up of a series of lesser spiral systems. It has long been known that the giant nebulae, or world systems in the process of formation, are spiral in shape, each having its central nucleus or dot from which the system emanated. And since the outline of the spiral is a triangle, we see that the triangle with the dot on top, with a dot at the apex, is a cosmic symbol which correctly portrays the law of manifestation of individuals, of worlds, of universes. For the life cycle of all forms of manifestation is spiral in character. As above, so below. We may think our lives are on a dead level because our physical, mental, and spiritual lives may seem to be but a succession of days and nights in which we experience similar conditions, but by a study of the law, we find that all evolution is a spiral, each life having its personal, racial, and universal motions. Hence, we find that we evolve, we pass over again and again the decisive points in our lives, but at each repetition, we are on little higher round of experience and attainment. Each race as a whole and the planet itself also have their spirals of evolution. The widespread manifestation of triplicity is shown in the celestial signs, each which have a fixed, movable, and common quaternion, also 3 decans. Among these signs, there is triplicity for each of the 4 elements. Thus, the fire signs are Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, the earth signs Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, the air signs Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, the water signs Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. Astrologers also regard the 3rd day after the new moon as the most fortunate day of the month. The Hermetics had 3 symbolic animals connected with their magic: the bull symbol of earth, or philosophic soul, the dog, Herm Anubis, the mercury of the sages, or fluid, air and water, the goat symbol, and fire and generation. 3 is also the number of the Akasha, the so-called veil of deity, the great storehouse of all events, past, present, and future. 3 is a number of divine love, also man, woman, and magnetic attraction between them, united in the divine. It is divine love overshadowing and manifesting through the 2 witnesses mentioned in Revelation, man and woman. For every true marriage in which human love reaches up to and blends with the divine love is a witness on earth, and the divine love has been able to penetrate into and manifest through humanity. 3 is therefore the number of a perfect marriage made in heaven, or the masculine and feminine expression of human love united above the earth in divine love, the completion of the triangle. The triangle is preeminently the symbol of the triune Godhead, but all manifestations of that Godhead must contain a reflection of the triangle, the inner reality, the outer manifestation, and the life force which unites the 2. Else the deity would not be represented in his works. As number 2 symbolizes the one ray separated and manifested upon the physical plane in the pairs of opposites, so number 3 symbolizes the evolution of the pairs of opposites to a point of perfect balance, or at one with their source, the divine merging into them, that it may uplift and redeem them. In other words, in the 3, there is the dot, which overshadows each pair of opposites, the goal toward which they are evolving, the state of perfection which will manifest when the experience of both extremes have been garnered and indrawn to the point above the physical plane. Number 3, therefore, symbolizes the balance of all manifested things in the Godhead, is a prophecy of their ultimate perfection in their unity and divine. Hence the sacredness with which number 3 has always been regarded in religion. Applying this triune principle to humanity, we find that man and woman, being the microcosm of the macrocosm, and embodying all the pairs of opposites in nature, heat and cold, pleasure and pain, good and evil, must ultimately find their completion, balance, and perfection in union in the divine marriage above the physical plane. As they advance towards this perfection, they will of necessity balance all the pairs of opposites manifesting in their microcosm. Quote, all souls are pre-existent in the world of emanations and are in their original state androgynous, but they descend upon the earth, they become separated into male and female and inhabit different bodies. If therefore in this mortal life the male half encounters the female half, a strong attachment springs up between them, and hence it is said that the marriage, the separated halves are again conjoined, and the hidden forms of the soul are akin to the conundrum. End quote. Since the great goal toward which all manifested things are evolving in the reunion of many in the one, from which they emanated, as the positive and negative poles express on earth, they are ever seeking to return to their unity in the dot. Hence they attract or reach toward each other. When they unite and are balanced, they bring forth a third line, the base of the triangle, or the only begotten Son. The triangle is therefore the symbol of satisfaction, for the only true satisfaction is the response we feel to the force poured out through some form of union with the divine. The only real satisfaction is experienced in the thrill of oneness that comes when a ray from the divine within us finds expression and manifestation on any plane, physical, mental, or spiritual, from the thrill that results from the unselfish deed, a kind word, or a generous forgiveness, to the ecstasy of conscious union with the higher self, in the highest initiation, or in the most mystical sacrament, the marriage of the Lamb. Union between the positive and negative poles of dissimilar rays may make a union on the physical plane, but it can never bring more than physical satisfaction. And as this can be temporary, it cannot bring that true happiness which results from the union on all planes. As men and women are the lords of creation, so they must in turn become the redeemers, the dot above of the lower kingdoms, and lift up the lower aspects of creation into higher octave of expression. Even as Jesus said of the Christ within, quote, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me, end quote. So as men and women are united and lifted up, the Christ within them will they draw all the lower pairs of opposites, the lower kingdoms, onto them. Today there are many who awaken to the vital ideal of true marriage, are no longer satisfied with the mere husks or outer conceptions of life so long considered satisfying. They realize that in contracting a marriage, the religious aspirations of both the man and the woman should be centered in the same spiritual ideals, the same dot above, so that as both evolve and advance toward the realization of those ideals, they may grow even closer and closer. Thus, we may illustrate the following diagram. So there's a big diagram. For instance, a positive personality of the higher self, A, unites with the negative personality of the same higher self, A minus, to which it could alone truly belong, as they each advance spiritually and evolve upward toward the higher self of each, they must necessarily grow closer to each other, for they are evolving toward union with the same overshadowing dot. But if a positively personality of the higher self A should unite with the negative personality of another dot or higher self, of which it is not an emanation, say, of the higher selves, B or C, then as each personality advanced spiritually and evolved upward along its ray toward union with its higher self, instead of its personality growing closer together on all planes, they must inevitably grow further and further apart on the higher planes, and thus must ultimately lead to separation on the physical plane, for each one is evolving toward union with a different dot. Therefore, there may develop great inharmony on the physical plane, not because they are becoming less spiritual, but because they are advancing and being drawn into different currents of force, which do not harmonize. And as the great law of divine love, each seeks greater and more perfect expressions of harmony. When whatever physical harmony they may have been at first has expressed itself, the great law tends to separate them, and each may be able to manifest a higher state of harmony. In each case, separation on the physical plane, instead of being a calamity, is blessing and absolute necessity for the spiritual advance of each. In the martial relations of the present day, the spiritual lines of force are woefully mixed and tangled, both through the karma of similar mistakes in the past and through allowing other considerations than divine love to bring about union on the physical plane. No matter how energetically perfect the animal bodies of the parents may be, perfect love is the only force that will attract advanced souls to incarnation in the perfect bodies furnished by the parents. Without, only such souls will be attracted as are willing to incarnate under the loveliness conditions offered. But as we enter into the cycle of the new Aquarius age, there must be a great readjustment and untangling process carried out as rapidly as the working out of past karma permits, so that each may return to his or her true spiritual allegiance and make straight the crooked paths of spiritual force, the coming of the Christ. Happening now! For the Christ, the essence of divine dot, cannot manifest in perfection until its positive and negative vehicles are united and the path made straight. Thus, the illustrated by the story of John the Baptist being clothed in the skins and crying in the wilderness, for the soul is clad in its animal nature, skin, and wanders into the wilderness of the outer life until the path is made straight and a way for the manifestation of divine love through the law of unity is prepared. Therefore, from a geometrical standpoint, we see that a marriage can neither be truly harmonized unless there is common source of interest or aspirations outside of the above personalities in which the two can unite, or common dot into which the sides of the human triangle can merge. Even though both are expressions of the same divine self, if they are at all spiritually advanced, one and two seeks further spiritual advance through one school of religious or occult teachings, while the other seeks in a divergent school. For instance, if one be a Catholic and the other be a Protestant, or one an occultist and the other an Orthodox literal Christian, they must at least temporarily grow apart in their higher realms, even if they remain together on this physical plane, because they are separated in the higher realization and expression of their oneness. Of course, such persons will come together ultimately through a higher understanding, but only after a period of suffering, which should be unnecessary. In such cases, the course of their evolution, first separating for a time and then returning, they may be represented not by a triangle, but the hexagram, the figure which forms center and interlaced triangle, thus, Star of David, or the Seal of Solomon. This figure is the center of the Seal of Solomon, or the heart of wisdom. Hence, they will reach their true union through the suffering of the spiritual loneliness, etc., only after they found the heart of wisdom. And if one subordinates his or her spiritual ideals to the other, spiritual growth of both is retarded. I hate that word. In other words, only as the lives of both are blended on the planes and are centered in common ideal outside of the above their personalities, can they grow into the perfect spiritual oneness represented by the overshadowing dot over the triangle. As this spiritual oneness is obtained, the two manifestations grow closer and closer together on the baseline, the physical plane, until finally, instead of reaching the divine along the slanting complementary lines forming the sides of a triangle, the forces from each are indrawn to the center, where they blend into the vertical line, the straight and narrow path, which reaches in oneness direct to the divine within. Thus, therefore, we would say that the effective remedy for the divorce evil is to teach, firstly, the necessity for oneness of spiritual ideals, and secondly, the necessity of both souls following the divine guidance of their overshadowing dot, until through prayer and meditation, they receive the positive assurance from within that their lines of spiritual evolution converge toward the same spiritual dot, or their souls had emerged from and are evolving back to the same divine source, the creative dot or the oversoul, overshadowing the first triangle. But before they can do this, they must be sure that they are freed themselves of self-deception and a determined self-will, which makes the thing they want seem to be the right thing, even though it requires excuse after excuse to make it plausible. On the other hand, do not be too hasty in deciding that each is evolving toward a different center, for it may be that in reality both are seeking the same point, but have not yet found the straight and narrow path common to both, or even realized that their complementary lines are ultimately reached the same dot. For even the fact that they have recognized their spiritual unity does not mean that there will be no more unpleasant lessons to learn, no fiction in the adjustments necessary on the physical plane. But whatever frictions may develop and whatever inharmonies may assail them, their unity in the higher realms will enable them to recognize the true nature of these and look upon them as tests meant to prove them, while the overshadowing divine love will give them strength to overcome such conditions and make them but transitory storms which clear the air. A little extra patience and toleration and a willingness to give up a preconceived idea as to what is only a best way to reach the goal may open their eyes to the fact that each is seeking the same divine dot, but has a different way of manifesting it from the time being. Only as we are permitted the divine dot to shine into our hearts and draw our souls into oneness with it can we obtain the wisdom and love, which will draw to us that which is our own and reveal to us beyond the possibility of mistake our next step. This teaching must not be made the excuse for divorce without adequate cause. For a union, even though it may not be ideal, may nevertheless be the same means of teaching the most important lessons of this incarnation. And as we do not limit ourselves to the first life period, there is plenty of time for the adjustment in accordance with the law. So that was a mouthful. I'm going to leave it there. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, because we're going to continue to number 3, because 3 is important. And everything that was just said is absolutely true. And that alone helps people when you're in a relationship or you're looking for love or you're in the, it's all about the spiritual attainment of the dot. If you're on 2 different dots, you're going to magnetize away from each other unless you're going to obtain that dot. And most people are for the outwardly lusty junctures of marriage and spiritually aren't seeking the same dot, they're seeking other dots. So you need to find your one true dot. So it's very interesting. I hope you got something out of that. I hope that explains if a lot of people are in marital disarray or spiritual disarray with other people. That right there is something to listen to. So with that, love and light to each and every one of you. I'll see you on the next one. Have a wonderful day, night, evening, afternoon, brunch, morning, breakfast, wherever you are in the world. Please consider giving me a love donation if you have it within you to help me out. I'm in desperate times and I need to have a better birthday, which is next week. Scary. Never thought I would have celebrated a birthday in destitute, but here we are. Love you guys. See you on the next one. Bye.